stars and stripes in my soul. Steel toes on, boots in the gravel, heartland truth on every channel. Open Bible, flag on the wall. We say what we believe when we don't talk at all. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. We back the badge, we guard the border. We love our guns and law and order. They try to shame every word we say, but we don't bow down, we just press play. This is red, white, and raise hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rebel from the back road to the bell. Hey, we won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raise hell. You can cancel the show, but not the crowd. We're still here, still talking loud. Hand of the free on every spell. Hit that mic, host, let the truth ring out. This is red, white, and raised hell. Cowboy hat, church bell, can't scare us into silence. We were born to rail from the back road to the beltway. We won't fade, we won't fail. Proud, loud, standing tall. Red, white, and raised hell.
All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Are you ready to rock and/or roll? Look at that shot. Look at that shot on this screen right now. Yeah, that's him. That's a very, very angry man. Look at that guy on the right. That is a very, very angry man. And that's in many ways, I think, what you might call a very dangerous man. Seriously, unhinged and simply not credible and not possible for us to allow that kind of a person to represent us, to represent the Republican Party, to represent the state of Ohio, to represent anything, quite frankly. That's Casey Putsch. He's the likes to call himself an outsider because obviously Donald Trump made being an outsider politically popular when he came out of nowhere, being a non-politician, when the presidency 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, ish, started in 2015, and of course was elected 10 years ago in 2016. But really quite an astounding development here. You know, a guy trying to play the role of the last angry man. You know, I'm mad as hell and I'm not gonna take it anymore. And that's you can ride that. Excuse me. You can ride that maybe through a campaign rally if you want to, once or twice, kind of like Cory Booker tried to do. You can't make that the whole of your campaign when you don't have answers and you don't have ideas and you have nothing but hatred and animosity and rage to an opponent. And that's what he is. This is a guy who wants to be Ohio governor. This is a guy who wants to be the leader of the Republican Party. And the answer is no, it just cannot be. I interviewed him in January, you may recall, and I'm going to give you a couple of bites of that a little bit this morning because Vivek was at Ohio State last night. Vivek was with TPUSA carrying on Charlie's mission, which is obviously of tremendous importance. I wish I could have been at Ohio State yesterday. I really do. I would have loved to have been in the crowd, and maybe behind the scenes a little bit, talking to Vivek and talking to the other folks at Turning Point about the ongoing mission of carrying on Charlie's legacy, carrying on his work, which is really what it has to be all about. And so, I couldn't be there because of obligations. Obviously, we're in the middle of a building on this and a transition period for me, so I couldn't be there. But boy, oh boy, I watched some clips of Vivek last night handling questions from the audience and from Lawrence Jones of Fox and everybody else that was a part of that thing with aplomb. A guy who is very, very well prepared to lead. Do we have some questions about Vivek? Absolutely. Is there any question as to who should be the Republican nominee? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That primary is coming up on May 5th. And what is today, the 22nd? Ooh, flip calendar, flip quote of the day. What is the, that date that is coming up so quickly? Honestly, it's when we decide the future of the state of Ohio. You nominate somebody like wild-eyed, screaming, screeching, angry man Casey Putsch to go up against Amy Acton. There's very little difference between them. And Amy Acton coasts to victory over an underfunded and unprepared and unplanned guy who's just, trying to spew hatred at every turn. That's just the reality of it, seriously. But that's coming up quickly. May 5th, we decide the future of Ohio, not in November. May 5th, we get the right guy, Vivek Ramaswamy. November will take care of itself. 22nd of April. Failure is not the worst thing in the world. The very worst thing is not to try. Amen to that, brother. That's why we're doing what we're doing every single day. We are trying to make a difference, trying to have an impact, trying to influence people that need some guidance. And that's what we're here for. Coming up today in about an hour, we're going to talk with Judge David Engler. He is he's actually a juvenile court judge and serving in Trumbull County. And he filed a lawsuit against the state of Ohio over the 2023 abortion on demand constitutional amendment that the left weaponized and managed to get passed. And now you can kill your baby literally up until the moment you're crowning. If that's what you want, that's what you can do. The state of Ohio can't stop you. Judge Engler has filed a lawsuit, against the state Attorney General Dave Yost, the Secretary of State Frank LaRose, and the Ohio Ballot Board specifically, challenging the constitutional amendment and the process. He said that the amendment's language eliminated longstanding parental consent requirements and judicial bypass procedures for minors that want abortions. It's a huge deal. It may be the way forward. It may be the path forward to undoing all of the damage that the passage of that amendment is doing to the state and to maybe its future leaders who are not getting a chance at life. Judge Engler is going to join us to talk about that and a whole lot of it. They're coming for him, by the way, hard too. They're coming after him for wearing a freedom shirt like the one I was wearing yesterday, suggesting that somehow indicates bias on his part and whatever else they can do to try to take down somebody who's a strong voice like that. So Judge Engler is going to join us at 8 o'clock this morning. The first hour, though, is going to be devoted to all of our stuff. And I'm going to start, like I said, with the governor's race. We also are going to talk, I'm having second thoughts about whether I want to start with the SPLC, because I just have a whole lot of can you diggits to give to Kash Patel and the FBI. In fact, let me do that, and we'll hit the Vivek thing and the Casey Putsch thing really, really hard in a moment. Dylan, do me a favor, pull up the Tuesday clip, or excuse me, the Wednesday clip. It's about the fifth one down. It's the numbered one, 125. Grab that one for me. That is the Newsmax version or variation or coverage of huge story. The SPLC, the hate group that gets to designate everything else as hate groups. Okay, that's what the SPLC is. All right, you finding that one there, Dylan? There we go. Okay, that's not what the screenshot should be. There's if you click, it's the SPLC. It's Okay, I see what you're doing. You're focused just on the video there. Gotcha. Okay. The headline that I'm looking for, if you zoom it out, bingo, there you go. Thank you, Dylan. Southern Poverty Law Center indicted. Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, the hate group of all hate groups that gets to judge everything conservative as a hate group. Turning Point USA hate group, Charlie Kirk individual hate monger, conservative, any conservative organization whatsoever, any Republican organization whatsoever, any pro-life group whatsoever, any pro-Second Amendment group whatsoever, all deemed and designated by the SPLC as a hate group. And then the SPLC, by virtue of branding itself as a civil rights organization, can impact and effectuate a lot of public, and not just public opinion on those particular groups, but they can impact funding. They can impact the welcomeness of these groups and their impact in organizations in schools, for example. The SPLC declares the Turning Point USA to be, and Turning Point Action as a hate group. Well, what school district is going to allow a chapter of Turning Point USA on their school campus, in their clubs? None of them, because of that. The SPLC is a very, very dangerous organization and has been for a very long time. Let me quote from the article. This is, again, just Newsmax's coverage. A federal grand jury in Alabama indicted the SPLC on 11 counts yesterday, charging the civil rights nonprofit, with defrauding donors through a concealed program that paid members of the KKK and other extremist groups, according to the acting attorney general in the Trump DOJ, Todd Blanche, and the FBI director, Kash Patel. This case represents the most significant federal prosecution ever brought against any leading civil rights organization. And again, take that last part with a grain of salt. The indictment, returned in the district court for the Middle District of Alabama, charges the Montgomery, Alabama-based organization with 6 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of making false statements to a federally insured bank, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Acting U.S. Attorney Kevin P. Davidson signed the charging document. At the Justice Department news conference yesterday, Todd Blanche, again, the acting AG who replaced Pam Bondi, said prosecutors allege the SPLC paid roughly $3 million between 2014 and 2023 to 8 people tied to the Klan. Now, this is on brand for this organization, by the way. Also to United Klans of America, the National Socialist Party of America, also on brand. The Aryan Nations linked Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club and a group called America First. Let's study that. One recipient, described as the leader of the group that organized the 2017 Unite the Fight rally in Charlottesville, the one where the lie was born, the meme lie that the left tried to use, that Donald Trump somehow, some way orchestrated this Charleston massacre that led to the death of a woman who was hit by a car by one of the Unite the Right individuals. Remember, this was supposed to be just peaceful people against the removal of the statues down there. But when they showed up, they were met with Antifa, and a big brawl ensued, which you can imagine. And then, of course, again, somebody was killed, and they tried to blame all of that on Trump. One individual who was a leader of the group that organized that was paid about $270,000 over 8 years, according to Blanche. Quote, the SPLC was not dismantling hate groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred. Break that down. What does that mean? It means that the SPLC was taking money and giving it to groups that they list as hate groups, and then paying them to stir up trouble, to start conflicts, to start fights, and so on and so forth, so that they can then decry it. So they were basically setting up the very thing that they proclaimed to hate, so that they could jump up and say, "Look at that! Look what they did." It's not dissimilar from January 6th, if we're being honest. All right. And we're not talking about SPLC being involved in January 6th, but you know what I mean. Federal agents in the crowd of people who were advised and admonished by President Trump to peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol and make your voices heard by chanting, by yelling, stop the steal, all the things they were going to do. But then the federal agents got in there to ramp up and gin up the crowd and to tell them to storm the Capitol and to say, let's go, we got to get inside. And they set the table for that even the day before. All right. So let's get the groups that we hate ginned up to commit some violence, to commit some crimes, some criminal activity, so that we can then come down on them and expose them as being the criminals, as being a party of violence and so forth. Very, very similar to what happened on January 6th. Blanche said the group never disclosed the informant program to donors in violation of nonprofit transparency rules. So anybody who's giving money to the SPLC, since it's a nonprofit, deserve to be told we're funding hate groups that we actually don't like, so we can force them or pay them to go and commit terrible acts, so that we can then condemn them and look like, you know, the higher ground moral authority. Prosecutors allege payments moved through at least 5 sham entities, including the Center Investigative Agency and a whole bunch of others which are irrelevant. The names are irrelevant to us. Kash Patel, in a post on X mirroring his own news conference remarks, said the SPLC lied to their donors and paid extremist leaders whose activity in at least one case was used to facilitate the commission of state and federal offenses. This is extraordinary. This is massive news. Okay, Dylan, if you would, go ahead and fire that video that's contained within that article now. Thank you.
At least for once, I'm happy that my tax dollars are going to something that I can clearly see paying off. But this fraud is endemic. And make no mistake about it, Democrats had won about this. And I think that as Todd, or whoever the next Attorney General, Senate confirmed is, they need to look at fraud. They also need to look at the foreigners who are funding news sites and all of this garbage in America, because that is having, Chris, you're talking about Iran wants divisiveness within America. I want the Attorney General also to look at those funding streams as well. That's not necessarily taxpayer fraud, but that is very important. And we have serious consequences. You have these Chinese misinformation, Iranian misinformation. I don't envy the next Attorney General because they got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, they do. But this is a big moment. This step against an organization that has been, as I've described before, has been targeting good, honest, conservative organizations and labeling them as hate groups in order to limit their effectiveness, limit their ability to be invited to certain venues, to organizations, schools, and so on and so forth. The idea of branding, Turning Point USA a hate group. It's just, and we can go down a list. We've done it before. But the SPLC now being exposed for what they are. And a political organization, not a nonprofit, a political organization who's operating solely to aid and assist socialist, Marxist, Democrat organizations, candidates, DNC, and so forth. They're there to make a difference in the politics of the country. That's not what a 501c3 is supposed to do. That's not what a nonprofit is. And it's not what a civil rights group does either. They call themselves a civil rights organization. They're not. So the SPLC being popped yesterday and being hit with this, indicted and hit with this massive amount of charges is extremely important. So that's why I deviated a little bit from the top story, which I believe is going to be Casey Putsch in the state of Ohio. But you know what? As long as we're doing other things besides that, and that's just, again, I threw that up there as the episode cover for today. But let's talk about another state real quick. I truly believe that what happened in Virginia yesterday is going to cost this. Let me rephrase. I believe that what happened in Virginia yesterday has the potential to cost us this republic. Okay? What happened in Virginia yesterday was a crime. It was a state-sponsored crime led by the head of the state, Governor Spanberger, who ran a campaign trying to convince Virginians after Glenn Youngkin, who was a very effective conservative Republican governor in Virginia. She ran a campaign on being a moderate, trying to represent all Virginians. No more partisanship. That was the way she actually campaigned. And she convinced enough Virginians that that's who she was and that's what she was going to be to win in a very relatively easy election for her. It was pretty much a rout. Winsome Sears, of course, was the Republican opponent, and she just never had a chance. So Abigail Spanberger ran a campaign on being a moderate, saying she's going to represent everybody in Virginia, and almost immediately began destroying every potential and possible bipartisan movement in the state of Virginia that ever existed, and just went full on radical Marxist from the beginning, from budgeting policy now to what I believe, as I said, could indeed end up costing us the republic. And the steps aren't hard to follow here. When I connect these dots, I'm not, reinventing the wheel here. This is pretty elementary and easy to follow. Abigail Spanberger engineered a Democrat takeover of the state yesterday to the tune of a 10-1 Democrat leaning district advantage. 10-1, meaning that less than 10% of Virginia is considered Republican. According to the way they will have representation by the delegation of Virginia members of Congress, that less than 10% of the people of Virginia are Republican. Now, what does that mean? It means very simply that if they only have one Republican-leaning district out of 11 in the entire state, they're saying that there is, that is the percentage of people that are Republican. But the reality is, as we all know, that is not true. They just elected a Republican governor 4 years ago. They elected Glenn Youngkin, and Glenn Youngkin served honorably. And actually, he served 2 terms, didn't he? But Glenn Youngkin, no, I think it was 4 years ago. But Glenn Youngkin and the Republicans represented Virginia as a 2-party state, okay? They don't want a 2-party state in Virginia because they don't want a 2-party country. They want full-on, total authoritarian, Democrat, Marxist, socialist, communist control. And so what they engineered yesterday was the worst, most blatant violation of anti-gerrymandering laws, I think, in American history. We've seen some bad stuff in California. We've seen some bad stuff. I mean, I could argue, and I should argue, that Massachusetts is the worst, because I believe it's Massachusetts. Dylan, check on this for me if you would. I believe Massachusetts is the only state that has 0 representatives from one of the 2 parties. In other words, Texas doesn't have any, Texas is not a state where, even though it's big red, Texas is not a state that has no representation of Democrats. Florida is a very red state now. Alabama is a very red state. Oklahoma is a very red state, but they all have Democrat members of Congress, because that party deserves to be represented as well. And districts should be drawn, allowing both parties a chance to win these races. But I think it's Massachusetts that says, nope, no Republicans here at all. Nope, 13 different members of Congress from our state, and all of them are Democrats. Republicans have no say whatsoever. That would be the worst gerrymandered state, but the reality is the percentage of people, conservative Republicans living in Massachusetts, is rather small. I'm not saying it's legitimate and it's justifiable for there to be no Republican representative in that state, representing that state in Congress. But if you want to argue size-wise, maybe the percentage is very, very low percentage of Republicans. So you can get away with that without extremist gerrymandering. Okay. But that's not the case in Maryland. That's not the case in Virginia. It's not the case in Maryland either. It's not the case in Abigail Spanberger's Virginia. Like I said, they just had a Republican governor. There is a strong Republican contingent. The district map was drawn 6-5, meaning 6 Democrat-leaning districts, 5 Republican-leaning districts, as recently as yesterday. But now, and today, but now when the new maps are take effect for the midterm elections and for 2028's presidential election, these maps are going to be, they say, just temporary. They say temporary in order to defend and protect democracy. So let's see. You had 6 Democrat-leaning districts. You had 5 Republican-leaning districts in what is a very, very balanced state in that regard. It reflects the actual population of Republicans versus Democrats and vice versa in the state. That's not democracy? Let's let those two, very evenly matched delegations to Congress battle it out? That's not democracy? You think, Democrats, that democracy is taking that 5 Republican district contingent and shrinking it to 1, and that 6 Democrat district and ballooning it to 10. You think that is democracy? So that Republicans have virtually no voice whatsoever in the United States Congress? What is wrong with you people? How do you justify it? Oh, now I remember. You don't. You don't justify it. You don't justify it because you don't believe in that. You are simply acting out on your Trump derangement syndrome. If it's meant to battle Trump, if it's meant to derail the Trump administration agenda, then it's justifiable to completely wipe out the representation of Republicans in the Congress from the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's defensible as long as it's to stop Trump. Temporary, they said, as long as we get rid of Trump and the Trump agenda, it doesn't matter. If we rob Virginians of representation, if we rob Virginians of their representation in Congress, and that's not the word I'm looking for. I used that one already. But robbing them basically of their rights and their opportunities of their existence, saying, no, we're just a completely. Did you know that 94% of the Virginia population is Democrat? Yeah, that's why 94% have representation. Less than 10% are Republicans, whatever 10 out of 11 is, or 1 out of 11 is in the reverse. You understand the point? So why do I say it's going to end our republic? Think about it. We only have a 2 or 3 seat majority now. That's what we're trying to cling to in November. They just flipped likely as many as 4 seats in Virginia alone from Republican to Democrat. Ding, 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 ding. If nothing else changes, there goes the majority. California did the same thing, all in response to President Trump trying to do the opposite in Texas. In Texas, as you know, which is a very, very, very red state, but in the state of Texas, they recognize that there are Democrats there, and Democrats should have a delegation in Congress from that state. Look at Austin, very, very blue. Look at Dallas. Look at San Antonio. These are very, very blue states, or cities in that state, I should say. The overall representation is going to be red. The overall majority is going to be Republican in the state of Texas, but they recognize. But President Trump said, let's look at the actual population of registered Republicans in Texas to that of registered Democrats. And as much as those high population centers are blue, kind of like Ohio, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron, they're all blue. But the rest of the state is red. And so from a strictly registration standpoint, registered Republicans outnumber Democrats extraordinarily in the state of Texas. And so the representation, President Trump said, in Congress should reflect that, draw the lines to reflect that. Is that a bit of gerrymandering? Yeah, it is. But is it wiping out one side's representation in Columbus altogether, or in Washington altogether? No, it is not. But because President Trump said, based on the actual number of Republicans and the number of Democrats in the state of Texas, there should be about 4 or 5 more seats that are Republican than aren't. And so Texas voted on that, and away we went. California responded. California has got millions of Republicans in it. One of the biggest states in the country. along with Texas. And California basically did the same thing in reverse and wiped out any gains that might have been made in Texas. But now here comes Virginia, which is very much a split. Like I said, 6-5 was a pretty fair district leaning majority for the Democrats over the Republicans there. 10-1 is absurd. It's criminal. So you do understand the point. When I said yesterday's vote in Virginia could cost us the Republic, because Virginia is doing this. California has done this. We only have a 2 or 3 seat majority. If those seats flip red to blue and we don't find enough blue seats to flip back to red in the other states, we lose the majority. We lose the majority in November. The Trump agenda is dead. Democrats will not hold one committee hearing once they control the gavels. They won't hold one committee hearing about any of President Trump's agenda items. If they did, the new Democrat speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, would never bring it for a vote. There is nothing that Republicans could do legislatively to enact the agenda that they were voted to enact and to implement in 2024. Nothing. Instead of legislating over those 2 years, you would have nonstop investigations of President Trump, investigations of Pete Hegseth, investigations of Marco Rubio, of Stephen Miller, and you can go up and down the line to cabinet level positions, and you're going to find nothing but investigations and impeachments of every single one of them. The government will be ground to a halt. The economy will be ground to a halt. And then all of the momentum that we were trying to build for 2028 for J.D. Vance will have been destroyed. And once the Democrats take over House, Senate, and White House again, it's not a pendulum swing like often happens in government. It's not going to swing back again because they're going to do what we don't have the balls to do. They're going to nuke the filibuster. They're going to stop the Republicans from having any say in the Senate whatsoever. They already have a simple majority in the House. It will only take a simple majority vote in the Senate. And then they'll hand it to a Democrat president to sign, and you will have a 52-state nation. Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. will be declared states. There will be left-wing strangleholds. There will be 4 new senators that are Democrats, 2 from each of those 2 new states. We'll never, ever have a sniff at the majority in the Senate again. The Supreme Court, 9 members strong right now, 6 of them having been appointed by Republicans. That cannot stand. They will pack the court with up to 13 or 15 members. Some say as high as 21 members, and the Democrat president will be able to appoint them all. And confirmation hearings will be a breeze with that newly nuked Senate and with new senators coming from the other 2 states that they create. There will never be a majority of people voting against one of those Democrat nominees. The courts, the Congress, and the White House, all 3 branches of government, which are supposed to be separate but equal, will all be left-wing, Marxist, socialist, communist organizations. All 3 branches of government will be corrupted by that. It will be the end of the republic. So that's how big what happened yesterday was. Does that mean we should pack up our bags? No, of course not. Because we can still stop it. It's just that the road just got a lot harder to travel. With what happened in Virginia as kind of a benchmark, Democrats are proving that they're ready to play for blood. They don't care what it looks like. Abigail Spanberger doesn't mind having lied, saying I'm a moderate, and then coming out there and being as left-wing as any governor in the United States of America, maybe with the exception of the communist Islamist in New York, Zoltar Mamdani. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. And if it costs her reelection, She's not sweating it. And in fact, she doesn't think it will cost her reelection. She feels like she's doing the work of the rest of the TDS, of TDS suffering Americans. But what they did yesterday was seismic in Virginia, and it's going to be felt in Washington. Which means it's going to be felt everywhere. But what we have to do is become more motivated than we've ever been, really, to turn out. They can maneuver these districts, which of course they're doing in these gerrymandered districts. They can do that in Virginia, and they can do that in a lot of other states. But what we can do is protect our incumbents. We can protect our incumbents, and we've got new blood coming into primary. That's what May 5th is all about here, and of course the different primary dates in the other states. Republicans have to show up and find the most conservative candidates possible and put them in positions to win in these primaries so that we can then rally. And if they're incumbents, obviously they've already done it before. Let's put the wheels, of those machines in motion. If they're newbies, replacing either, retiring members of Congress, which there are a lot, or challenging and primarying out somebody, who are, the Mike Turners and Mike Carey's and Dave Joyce's and the others who are not, who are not conservative at all, that are just wearing the name tag that says Republican. If it's primarying those people, we need to rally like never before. The challenge before us is probably Virginia yesterday showed us how challenging, that's a terrible way of phrasing it, but how difficult the challenge is going to be. It's not impossible to do, but yesterday was a big step toward making it impossible. So I don't know about you, but I intend to get fired up as early as this primary on May 5th. I intend to get fired up, and I intend to get people. We're going to bring candidates on, and we're going to bring supporters on, and we're going to do everything we can to play our role here in Northeast Ohio in doing what's right by Ohio, but also supporting, organizations and messaging. It matters so very much on social media. Social media is evil. Social media is the devil. The only way to offset the evil that it represents, honestly, is to use it for some good. And that's what we're doing on this show. That's what we're trying to do with this channel, what we're trying to build it into something much bigger, so that we can have a bigger impact on protecting not just Northeast Ohio, not just the state of Ohio, but the country. And that's what we're here for. So big doings yesterday in Virginia impacting us here in Ohio. All right. And everywhere else for that matter. Which brings us to the Ohio governor's race, as I mentioned. Back in January, I interviewed a guy by the name of Casey Putsch, who's best known as a car guy. He is a car guy insofar as he's got a YouTube channel that's highly successful, speaking of social media, in which they talk about race cars and running and gunning and, in that field. The automotive gearheads love it, and, which is fine, super. Great lane to be in, stay in it, as far as I'm concerned. But this guy, Casey Putsch, decided he wanted to be governor, and he's going to run as a Republican. And so I said, well, that's interesting. We're going to have to explore this a little bit with this individual. Who is Casey Putsch and what is he all about? So I had him on the program in January, relatively early January. And so let's find out. And I didn't come in with an agenda. I just wanted to listen. What I heard was one of the most unhinged, and we got to pull this up here, Dylan. We're going to pull up, number one is fine there. It's an Instagram reel. This is just a portion of the hour-long interview that I did with Casey Putsch. And I asked him about his, dedication to the Republican Party, meaning the Republican people, the citizens in the state of Ohio. I asked him about his vision for the state of Ohio. I asked him about the budget, asked him about education, asked him about a whole lot of things that apparently he hadn't really thought out because he didn't have any answers. I haven't really read the budget. Wait a minute. You want to be the governor, the guy who manages and runs a $100 billion state budget. How do you not know what's in the budget? There's plenty of time for that. Okay, well, what are you saying now? And what he said for a straight hour is how much he hates, despises, and reviles Vivek Ramaswamy for being an ethnic minority. I would like to think no, but he has made no bones about it, talking about Vivek Ramaswamy's ethnicity as an Indian American, born in Cincinnati to two legal immigrant parents, by the way, which is A-OK. That's not a birthright citizenship anchor baby, but it's not stopping Casey Putsch from calling Vivek an anchor baby. It's not stopping him from impugning and maligning and making fun of Vivek's Indian heritage and his religion, which is not Christian, which is Hindu, which, by the way, is not ideal for me because I believe in our Judeo-Christian country, and I would love for all of our leaders to be, praying to the same God, but it's not required. The founders made that very, very clear. The government shall not establish a religion. Congress shall establish no religion, but it will also not prohibit the free exercise thereof. And that's what Vivek does. So all I heard from Casey in that interview and all I've seen from him in the campaign spots so far, he's running commercials of himself out there mocking again Vivek, saying, let's play cowboys and Indians as he fires a gun. Oh, don't worry. We're talking about the feathered kind, not the dot kind, he says. It's pretty crazy stuff. And the primary is going to feature Vivek Ramaswamy against this guy. There's a third candidate named Heather Hill, which is just so minor, it's not really worth our time and our attention, but because her campaign is so small and it's in disarray and so forth. But Casey Putsch, has assembled a relatively strong contingent of other last angry men who are just going along with the crowd. So I want to remind everybody of what this guy is and what this guy sounds like and what this guy looks like. I interviewed him and did a very, very respectful and calm. I didn't fight with him. I didn't argue with him, but a very, very calm interview with him back in January. And it doesn't matter how calm I stayed. He fired himself up to the point where there was smoke coming out of his ears and flames out of his eyes and just all of it intended to burn down Vivek Ramaswamy. But the other thing I learned is that he doesn't have any fealty or commitment to conservatism or the conservative Republicans in the state of Ohio. He says that the GOP must honor him, but he does not have to return that, when I say honor, meaning they're going to have to support him, but he doesn't have to return that support if somebody else is the primary winner, the standard bearer. He also says you shouldn't support him either. You shouldn't support the Republican nominee for governor unless it's him. If it isn't him, then you should stay home, which is just crazy, Tom. So this is a very short clip. It's about a minute and a half long of part of the conversation I had with Casey Putsch back in January. Dell, go ahead and fire that.
Happen is when I win the primary, the entirety of the GOP has to back me. Otherwise, they're sunk. So that's nice.
Casey,
money,
Casey, what if it doesn't?
With me, including what I have, and we're going to win. Period.
You're right. If you win the primary, the entire GOP is going to have to back you 100%. Absolutely needs to be. So what I want to ask you is, if things don't go your way, okay, yeah. Will the reverse be true? If Vivek wins the primary, what I mean is, if Vivek wins the primary,
support him?
Will you back him?
Absolutely not. I mean, well, I'm a Republican. I'm an American. I'm not going to do that. But I'm not going on the campaign trail supporting disgusting sellouts that have done nothing else. It's vulgar. Like, Vivek's entire running is just spitting in all of our faces, telling us it's rain, buying out the entirety of the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much my life is at stake right now? My family, they can kill me, set me up, destroy me through lawfare, 11 Ways to Sunday, buy out everybody I've ever known. So this is insanely dangerous. And I'm going to support that disgusting establishment? No, respectfully, I will remain a conservative and a Republican, and I am supportive of our President of the United States and our future in the world. And I will still work to make Ohio better, but I'm going to sit it out. I'm going to sit it out. And honestly, everybody else in Ohio should too.
That's your governor? That's your representative in the executive office of the state of Ohio? I almost don't have to say anything else other than rewatch that. I mean, seriously, out of control hatred, out of control radicalism. If I win the primary, all Republicans in the ORP have to back me. If Vivek wins the primary, I'm not supporting him. I'm not supporting that disgusting. He thinks Vivek is disgusting. The words that he has used over and over and over again are just extraordinarily insulting to describe Vivek Ramaswamy or his heritage or his race, etc. But I'm not backing that. I'll sit it out. I'll sit it out. Every Republican in Ohio should too. If he doesn't win the primary, he says, turn the state over to the Democrats. Let the Democrats have it. That's basically what that said. I challenged him on it, by the way. But is that not what he said? If I don't win the primary, I'm sitting it out. And he said, everyone in Ohio should too. Why would Republicans sit out the race because Casey Putsch didn't win the primary? He's trying to convince people to let Amy Acton turn the state blue. It's the only reason you come into a campaign with no ideas, with no grasp of the issues, with no grasp of the budget. You come in with just piss and vinegar. You come in with flames coming out of your eyes and just raw hatred for another guy. And the hope is to tear him down enough that when you don't win the primary, he doesn't win the general. And you tell people, stay home. Stay home. Now, why is this such a big deal? Just one state. It's just one governor's office, right? It's so much more than that. Because if a guy like Casey Putsch, who has developed a following, if a guy like Casey Putsch can convince Republicans to stay home in the general election and not vote for Vivek Ramaswamy, then they stay home and they're not there to vote for members of Congress either. They're not there to vote in a wide-ranging midterm election on extremely important things like property taxes. They're not there to vote for county commissioners. They're not there to vote for Republicans in many local offices. They're not there to vote for the Republican candidate for Secretary of State. They're not there to vote for the Republican candidate for Treasurer. They're not there to vote for the Republican or conservative nominees for Ohio Supreme Court. You understand the danger of this? Stay home. I'm not voting if I don't win the election. If you tell people to sit it out, they're not just going to sit out that one election. They're not going to go and vote. How much damage does that do to the Republican Party? How much damage does that do to the conservative brand? Now, I've got another one. It's just another clip. So it's number 3 down now, Dylan. It's GOP governor candidate Casey. And I think this one is actually going to come from my Facebook page. That first one was from the Instagram page. But let's cue up this one. Yeah. Watch this. Some of this is similar to what you just heard, but there is a little bit of a variation as well that I want to point out. Again, in pointing out how, what's the word we want to call this guy? He's unhinged. He cannot be the leader of our party, much less the leader of this state, being this wild and radical and unhinged and furious. This was in January, 5 months even before. We're 2 weeks away from the primary now. But 5 months ago, or 4, well, hold on. what's my math? Three and a half months ago we did this. It's about when we started this show. But this was in early January, and it was, at that point in time, 5 months away from the primary. And listen to how angry and vitriolic and hateful he is. And it apparently is the only card he has to play to build a following. We are going to be mad as hell and not take it anymore. Boom. The last angry man. Boom. Mr. Putsch goes to Columbus. Boom. That's the mentality that he's trying to sell here. And I don't think we're buying. Watch.
This is 100% on the Ohio GOP and everyone who has endorsed Vivek. If the state goes blue, it is on you. It is on Vivek. For all of time, you did this. The fact of the matter is this whole left or right BS charade is BS. So respectfully, yes, I said that. I'll sit out. That's my right. I don't like it. That's not a good civic duty. But the fact of the matter is we have all been just astroturfed this disgusting man, Vivek Ramaswamy, and who has nobody's best interest in mind.
So there are a lot of people online suggesting that you have or you plan to ask Democrats, because of our open primary system in the state, to cross over in the primary and vote for you to get Vivek out of there. Is that true?
I'm telling you right now, there's going to be a lot of people that are left and independent that if they legally have the ability to vote for me, wherever that is, they're going to do it.
So is that a yes? Is that a yes? You want Democrats to come over and vote in the Republican primary?
All I can tell you is if it is legal and appropriate for people, just people, to vote for me, I would encourage them to do so because I've got the best interest of all of us in mind. So yeah, if they can legally do that, I don't even have a choice. They're just going to end up doing it.
Okay. Mad as hell, not going to take it anymore. Got it. Check. Last angry man. Check. Vivek Ramaswamy is disgusting. You heard that, right? Said those words. Didn't say his ideas are disagreeable to me or even his ideas are disgusting. He said Vivek is disgusting. Okay. This is a guy who is running in a Republican primary who says Democrats should come over and disrupt our primary. Democrats, come and vote for me. I asked him point blank, are you saying that Democrats should take advantage of the open primary system in Ohio and come over and decide the Republican nominee for governor? He said, yeah, if they have a legal ability to come over here and vote for me, if you're on the left or in the center, come and do it. Disqualifying. Is that not disqualifying for any candidate? I consider that to be, you are now persona non grata in the Republican Party. You literally are calling for a Democrat invasion of the Republican primary so that they will vote for you because they know that you and your uneducated, I don't want to say uneducated, but your lack of knowledge of what it takes to be the governor, particularly given all of the things that I asked about, the budget and so forth. I don't know. I haven't read the budget. How'd you declare for your candidacy for governor if you haven't read the budget? Don't know what Ohio's $100 billion are being spent on. But so when I say uneducated, I mean not knowledgeable about what it takes, but you come in here, just throwing stones at Vivek Ramaswamy, all of these bombs and without having any substance at all, no substance at all, just angry man. And then saying, here's what I want. I want the Democrats to come and vote in the Republican primary because that's the only chance I'm going to have to win. That's extraordinary. And what he said at the beginning of that clip as well. I want to watch that again, Dylan. Just be ready to pause it when I say it. I want to watch that whole clip that I pulled from my hour-long interview, by the way, with Casey Putsch. And I'm going to, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to upload it to Rumble, and I'm going to upload it in our locals community separately so that you can watch it for yourself. I want to make sure that everybody can see that again now that we're 2 weeks away from the actual primary. But I want everybody to see the full hour that I spent with Casey Putsch, because I think it's extraordinarily important that people see it in its context. But go ahead and pull that up, Dylan. I want to watch that again. if Ohioans follow your lead and sit it out, you just said you will sit it out. You won't vote for Vivek and you won't vote for Amy Act, and you'll sit it out. And you said all Ohioans should do the same. Do you really want to roll the dice and let Amy Act win this?
This is 100% on the Ohio GOP and everyone who has endorsed Vivek. If the state goes blue, it is on you. It is on Vivek. For all of time, you did this. The fact of the matter is this whole left or right BS charade is BS.
Stop.
So respectfully.
Stop. Thank you. That was the other part of this I wanted to focus on. Casey Putsch says there's no difference between you and the left. Casey Putsch says this guy who wants to be Ohio's governor says there's no difference between left and right. He said it's all BS. Is that not an ad for the Uniparty? If there's no difference between us, is that not the same thing as the Uniparty? Is that not telling Republicans to join with Democrats? There's no difference. It's all BS. This, right and left, red and blue, it's all BS, Casey Putsch said. I don't know about you, but the left in the state of Ohio, the left that he said is just like the right, 3 years ago, voted overwhelmingly by way of a ballot initiative and a constitutional amendment to kill babies to the moment of their birth in the state of Ohio. That's not us. He just said there's no difference between right and left. Dylan, back that up by 10 seconds. Play that line again. I want everybody to know this because we are 2 weeks away and this guy has a following of sorts. And it needs to be exposed. He needs to be exposed. Play that part again from 10 seconds back. Go ahead.
And everyone who has endorsed Vivek. If the state goes blue, it is on you. It is on Vivek. For all of time, you did this. The fact of the matter is this whole left or right BS charade is BS. So respectfully, yes, I said that. I'll sit out. That's my right. I don't like it.
I'm not going to vote for Vivek Ramaswamy. But I won't vote for Amy Acton either, he says. I'll just sit it out. And then he said every other Republican in Ohio should do the same, sit it out. Because this whole right and left thing is BS. I don't know about you, but when I see a man dressed up as a woman walking into a women's locker room or shower room and proceeds to get naked in front of them or goes to play on their sports team, I'm repulsed by that. I am very defensive and protective of the girls and the women who have to suffer that. People on the left say, go boy, go. Oh, I'm sorry. Go, they go. Go, they go. Or whatever crap pronoun system that they want to do. I'm sorry. There is a difference between the right and the left there, Casey. The abortion issue, there's a difference there. The taxation issue, there's a difference there. Every social issue, every fundamental government issue, there is a very, very strong divide between the right and the left. He said there's no difference. It's a charade. We're just like the Democrats. That's why when I asked him the rest of that, do you want Democrats to come over into the Republican primary to decide who the Republican nominee is going to be? He basically said yes. He doesn't see a difference between us and them, right and left. He apparently supports Uniparty. There's only one way to receive those remarks, right? Play the rest of the clip.
That's not a good civic duty. But the fact of the matter is we have all been just astroturfed this disgusting man, Vivek Ramaswamy, and who has nobody's best interest in mind.
So there are a lot of people online suggesting that you have or you plan to ask Democrats, because of our open primary system in the state, to cross over in the primary and vote for you to get Vivek out of there. Is that true?
I'm telling you right now, there's going to be a lot of people that are left and independent that if they legally have the ability to vote for me, wherever that is, they're going to do it.
So is that a yes? Is that a yes? You want Democrats to come over and vote in the Republican primary?
All I can tell you is if it is legal and appropriate for people, just people, to vote for me, I would encourage them to do so because I've got the best interest of all of us in mind. So yeah, if they can legally do that, I don't even have a choice. They're just going to end up doing it.
If Ohioans follow, I don't know about you, but I know what I just heard. I just heard him say, yeah. Anybody who can legally come over and vote for me, do it. And then I don't have a choice. They're just going to do it. You just told them to do it. You just told Democrats to come into the Republican primary and choose the nominee. Which one are they going to choose? The one that's well-funded, the one who with better name recognition, the one who is an endorsed candidate of Donald J. Trump? You think the Democrats are going to come into the Republican primary and vote for that guy? Or are they going to vote for the guy that's easy to beat? So that Amy Acton, Dr. Lockdown, can return this state to the massive tyrannical hell that we became for about 2.5 years under Dr. Lockdown's rule. Yes, she was given the keys to lock Ohio down by Mike DeWine, but she made the calls. And now she wants to be our governor, and you want people to come into the Ohio primary and decide. You want Democrats to come into the Ohio Republican primary to decide who the Republicans put up against her. That is crazy town. That is, in my estimation, ought to be criminal. It's not, because Ohio does have an open primary, and that's our fault. That's our problem, and we should be working to solve that and to close the primary. But the reality is that Democrats can come in and vote for Republicans in Republican primaries, and, of course, in a way that would serve their best interest. That is something we have to stop. But most importantly, we have to stop unhinged guys like that. How unhinged, by the way, and I know we've got a guest waiting. I do see the green room now, but I want to play one more clip here. Dylan, under Wednesday, it's the top one now. It's the newest one. I wanted people to see exactly what I'm talking about. And you probably have already seen this because I know this audience is astute and alert and paying attention. But if you haven't, this is the most recent commercial run by Casey Putsch. Tell me if you think this sounds like somebody you want representing you in Columbus, Ohio as our governor. Play it.
Candidate for Ohio governor is sparking a conversation about racism in politics.
You got it.
Our Columbus Bureau reporter Morgan Trow is breaking down for you why this post is causing controversy. We do want to warn you that some viewers might find some of the language in this report offensive.
Hey, Vivek, you want to play Cowboy versus Indians?
In a video posted on social media by Ohio Republican gubernatorial candidate Casey Putsch.
100%. It's a
Dylan, you can kill this. This is, pull that, Dylan. I don't want the commentary from the peanut gallery there on Channel 5. What I wanted is just a Vivek X post. If you can do that, it's the top one. You got to refresh maybe, but it's the one on top. It just says this. It's just the post from Casey Putsch, basically an online ad. Can you make that happen? So we don't need the, yeah. No, it's just, yeah, it's all right. That's all right. Yeah, the story, maybe that is the one. Maybe, okay, I see it now, Dylan. Never mind. That's a miscommunication. My bad. That's Casey Putsch writing, Putsch on his X account writing, "This is hilarious, vote Putsch, save Ohio." And then it is connected to the Channel 5 video with the talking heads there. Okay, that's fine. Dylan, don't worry about it. We don't need to see it because I don't want to give all of that airtime to the Channel 5 people. Thank you, Dylan. I wanted you to see the part that you needed to see there, which is the very beginning of the clip. Casey Putsch for governor coming out of the barn door with a rifle and saying, "Hey, Vivek, want to play Cowboys and Indians?" Turns, shoots, fires. Vivek is an Indian. And then I don't know what you want to call it, remark, "Don't worry, we're not talking about feathers. We're talking about the ones with feathers, not the ones with dots." Okay, so now you're talking about playing Cowboys and Indians and shooting Native Americans. Now, I realize that as kids, we all played Cowboys and Indians, and I had the whole set. I had the holster, and I had the hat, the silver guns and everything else. And sometimes I would have the bow and arrow and do the Indian thing. Kids play kids' games. But what he's doing here with real guns and talking about Cowboys and Indians and talking about when he said, "Want to play Vivek," and then firing a shot at a guy that he has called disgusting, repugnant, and all kinds of other terrible things. Is that the representation you want in Columbus from our governor? unhinged. That's what he is. And it's dangerous for our state, and it's dangerous, quite frankly, for our brand. Conservative Republicans cannot be backing people like that. You got 2 weeks left to find a way to support Vivek Ramaswamy and make sure that we have the man that President Trump trusts to be the leader of the state of Ohio, being the one going up against Dr. Labcoat, the walking, talking lab coat who locked down the state and destroyed countless numbers of Ohioans, countless, their businesses, their jobs, their families, their educations, and so much more. We have a very short window to come correct and do this the right way. All right, before we get to our guest, I want to remind you about one of my good friends and one of the strongest supporters of everything we have been doing on Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. His name is Mark King, and Mark King has been helping people with Medicare needs for nearly 40 years in Northeast Ohio. He understands what is available because, it's different. In case you didn't know, Medicare, which is a federal organization, is different in Butte, Montana than it is in Cleveland, Ohio. It's different in New York City than it is in Dallas, Texas. The region depends on the kind of coverage that is available to you. So you need somebody who's been here for a long time, and he's not left this region. For nearly 40 years, Mark King has been helping people understand Medicare. And every little change in Medicare policy and services that are available, costs, Mark knows about, and he can educate you too. So if you are already on Medicare, you want to find out, am I getting the right coverage that I deserve? Am I paying the lowest price that I can pay for that coverage? Call Mark King. Phone number is 440-832-8936. Very simple. Call that number and ask for an appointment. Tell him Bob told you to call, and he's going to take great care of you. If you've never been on Medicare, but you're turning 65 this year, you have an enrollment period, an open enrollment period where you can choose your coverage from scratch. Mark will help you make that choice based on what you tell him you want and what is best for you. He's an independent agent. That means he is not beholden to one insurance company. He'll have plenty of options for you. The phone number again is 440-832-8936. You may also go to the website, keepingmedicaresimple.com. That's keepingmedicaresimple.com. And you'll see why it's been over 5 years now since I met Mark King that I've been sending seniors to him for Medicare coverage because I trust Mark and you can too. All right. I do want to dive back into it now. And changing topics altogether. I teased it at the top of the show. Judge David Engler is a Republican, and he's the judge serving in Trumbull County Court of Common Pleas, Domestic Relations, and Juvenile Division. He's been on that bench since November of 2024, when President Trump was reelected, of course. He is suing the state of Ohio. He's suing Dave Yost. I like Dave Yost. Why is he doing that? He's suing Frank LaRose, Secretary of State, and he's suing the Ohio Ballot Board. Why is he doing that? What is this all about? I asked Judge Engler to come onto our program and tell us what this is all about, and he is kind enough to join us. So let's welcome Judge David Engler to our program now here on Strictly Speaking Unfiltered. Judge, good morning. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate that, sir.
Oh, good morning. That was a interesting topic with that nonsense from Casey Putsch. That was crazy stuff. That is really crazy town stuff.
Yeah, it's very disturbing to me because, obviously we cannot have another, Republican or Democrat in Republican clothing like we have now, like Mike DeWine. We also cannot have somebody who is actually what I believe to be working on behalf of the Democrats by trying to take out, the conservative Trump-supported candidate for governor and try to take him down and to tell Democrats to come over and stop him in the Republican primary. Judge, I don't know what the hell that's all about.
No, right, absolutely, and I appreciate the invite to be on your program, and because the lawsuit I filed came about because of the first time you and I actually met back about March 13th of this year, right? And so I'm a juvenile court judge and a domestic relations court judge, and I've been a constitutional litigator for 40 years. I've represented Boys to Men, the producer of Hot in Cleveland, the country's largest white-collar criminal at the time, all sorts of different, litigation I've been involved in as a lawyer. But it all led up, I believe, to that moment in March when I'm at the Bring America Back to Life conference in Cleveland that you were so well moderated that entire conference. And this is what happened. The group was interviewing me for my endorsement, right? To endorse me on a right to life basis. And I said to them, let me make, I use technology. I've been a big technology, I've had a couple technology companies I started nationally and sold them all in the government space. I'm going to use technology to see if there's anybody here in this conference that has standing, that has the ability to challenge the 2023 abortion amendment in Ohio. Just as to show people on this committee that AI is changing everything in the judicial profession. To be a judge, to be a lawyer, AI has already changed it today. It's going to change it a little bit more by tomorrow. And the judges and the lawyers and everybody who interacts with those groups have to understand that. So I say I'll come back after lunch and tell you what I found out. Well, I come back after lunch and I do my research. And as it turns out, Bob, there were 110 people in the state of Ohio who have standing to bring litigation challenging the amendment. Of those 110 people, I'm one of them. That's why I actually say I'm not sure. I've done a lot of different things in my legal career, and now as a judge. And everything I go into, I go in a sort of a prayerful manner. Certainly later in my life, I've been more prayerful about everything. I think I might be in this race to have discovered this litigation that I did back in March in Cleveland. And here's the litigation. As a juvenile court judge, we heard something called juvenile bypass. That's when a minor wanted to have an abortion but did not want her parents' consent, okay? What that juvenile will do would come to the juvenile court judge. The judge would then appoint a guardian who would interview the juvenile to see if they were mature, if they were being extorted by someone or pressed into having an abortion by someone who didn't have their best interest at mind. And the court then would listen to the guardian, and then the court would make an independent decision as to whether to sign off on this abortion without the parents' consent. Judges did this across Ohio for the last 30 years. It's been the law in Ohio, 30 years, since 1986. Well, we no longer do that anymore, Bob. There's no more judicial bypass in Ohio. Why, you ask? The reason is because parental consent was eliminated in 2023 in the abortion amendment. It's gone. There's no need for my job anymore because today in Ohio, your 15-year-old daughter needs your permission for a tattoo, but your 15-year-old daughter does not need your permission for an abortion. So somewhere today in Ohio or this week in Ohio, there's going to be some sex trafficker who's taking their victim to a provider, having an abortion, literally covering up the crime, Bob, covering up the crime and moving on. Understand this. I take my oath of office very seriously. I'm the juvenile court judge in Trumbull County. My job that I raised my hand and swore I would uphold is to protect kids in Trumbull County. When I found out that I had the ability to bring this litigation to say, this is important. Right now, I need to do this. Once I understood that it existed, that I had the ability to challenge it, I created the lawsuit. I did the research. I filed it on my own behalf. It's the one instance where a judge can go back to being an attorney and represent themselves pro se, right? I hope another attorney is going to jump on or a law firm is going to jump on and take it over. I really don't want to represent myself. But I couldn't wait to do this because the safety of children is at risk. And it's crazy. And it's just a parents' rights issue. It's a parents' rights issue. And this is a fascinating constitutional thought, and I want to share it with you, is that in Ohio and across the country, this is what the law says. There are certain inalienable rights that are so fundamental. They come from the natural law, okay? Those inalienable rights are recognized by the Ohio Constitution, but not conferred. And even a constitutional amendment cannot abridge or destroy those rights. And what right am I talking about? The right to be a parent. which has always been recognized, most recently on March 2nd in the U.S. Supreme Court. There's a fundamental right for you and me to be parents, and for everyone else out there to be a parent. And they took that away from us in that amendment. It's craziness. It's absolutely lunacy. And Frank LaRose is head of the ballot commission, and Dave Yost is the AG. They're the respondents. Those two fellows could literally say, Judge Engler, you're right. They can say you're right because I know I'm right on the law. And everyone's coming after me. They're attacking me. The left is like, I'm under siege, because I'm bringing this lawsuit forward. They're calling me all sorts of names, mostly an old bald-headed guy.
Well, they're doing more than that to you, Judge. Real quick, just for a point of clarification on one of the last parts that you just said, and thank you for that great explanation. You said one of our most fundamental rights is to be a parent. Does that right begin at age 18? And the reason I ask is I always try to anticipate what the left is going to say. I always, what sort of a game they're going to play here. And they're going to say, yeah, and that 15-year-old deserves the right to decide whether she's going to be a parent or not. When you frame it that way. So does that right to be a parent begin at adulthood at officially 18, or is that for everybody of any age?
Well, it's of anybody of any age, that fundamental right to be a parent. But even, we see in our juvenile courts all the time minors who are parents, right? And minors who are parents are still under the guardianship of their parent. The grandparent will come into our court, and they still, are responsible for their child and now their grandchild. Sometimes kids ask to be emancipated during this process. But no, that argument, I understand it and it's very valid. But the right to be a parent is fundamental when you have a child, and what to do with that child when that child's in the world.
It just becomes a conundrum, though, like I said, because you're 1,000% correct. A parent who has a child has the right to control the circumstances. I won't say control the child, but control the circumstances in which that child lives and what behaviors that they have to follow and so forth. They have rules, responsibilities within their families. They should have a say in how their kids are educated, which is a huge issue in the state, and I think across this country as well. And denying parents the right to know what their kids are up to in school, what they're learning, what curricula they're learning, whether or not they're being indoctrinated with some of the wild radical stuff that we see going on, or whether or not they have, found themselves in a position of an unplanned pregnancy and what should happen with that. The child should not be able to do those things without parental input. And I think your lawsuit is spot on that. But like I said, it just presents a conundrum for us when we frame it as everybody has a right to be a parent, and thus they're going to say they have a right to decide when they want to be a parent, and therefore they're going to argue that this constitutional amendment is valid.
Absolutely, they will say that, and I think they've already said that. And it's interesting the response from the left attacking my lawsuit. And the Plain Dealer did an article maybe 2 or 3 days ago. And it was silly because for the unbiased opinion, they went to an abortion provider who, of course, said, I'm running for office and wanted to discount everything I had to say. I understand that. But they go to a professor from Case Western Reserve, a woman by the name of Jessie Hill. And this Jessie Hill runs a program called the Reproductive Freedom Initiative at Case Western Reserve University. She's also the ACLU attorney who was involved in the 2023 abortion amendment. They went to her, Bob, for like this unbiased opinion. She's the same woman in 2023 who said, really, parents should lose their consent when it comes to this issue. There shouldn't be any need for parental consent. Well, now in response to my article, my litigation, actually, she's out saying like, oh, this lawsuit has so many problems, I don't know where to begin. How crazy was the Plain Dealer for not understanding, like, she is not an honest broker. If you want to go to an opinion, but they quote this law professor from my alma mater, as if she's a person who should be taken seriously when her entire career has been about making money herself. I mean, her literally entire profession is about making money from the abortion industry. That's what she's done. And she's the one they go to for a quote. And she initially said back in 23, parents don't have a say, following up on the theory that you have.
Yeah.
And if I could for a second tell you about a case named Mirabelli. So in California, right? And it has the same thing to do with my case. In California, the state assembly people get together. Imagine you and me. And I said, hey, Bob, I got a great idea. Let's make it a law to make it illegal for teachers and guidance counselors, administrators to tell parents if their 13-year-old daughter wants to be referred to as a little boy today. They're going through a mental health crisis, but we don't want to say anything to parents. And the other assembly members say, great idea, Bob, let's pass it. And they made it a law, right? They made it a law in California. Well, a teacher by the name of Mirabelli said, no way am I going to do that. They took it up to the San Diego Federal District Court. The San Diego judge said the following, fantastic words. It was the trifecta of harm. You're causing teachers to lie to parents. You're taking parents away from their kids at a time when they need them. And most importantly, you're taking away from kids the love, affection, guidance, and counsel of the person they need most in this life. And the federal judge in San Diego said, absolutely not, got rid of the law. They took it up to the Ninth District Court of Appeals. What do? They overturn it. They overturn it. And it goes then to the Supreme Court on March 2nd of this year. In the U.S. Supreme Court, a 6-3 decision, they reaffirmed the right that you and I know, and all of your listeners probably know, there's a fundamental right to be a parent, and they threw that law out. They said, we're not going to make teachers lie to parents anymore. They said that's a terrible law. Same thing with the law here in Ohio. You cannot take a constitutional amendment and get rid of a fundamental right like being a parent. And that's my point. But they want to talk about it like it's an abortion issue. It's a parents' rights issue is what I'm fighting for.
Yeah, that's well said, Judge. And Judge David Engler is our guest. If you just tuned in and clicked on the podcast, Judge Engler is a juvenile court judge and domestic relations judge in Trumbull County. And he has filed a lawsuit again against the state, specifically against Dave Yost, Frank LaRose, and the Ohio Ballot Board on that elimination of parental consent, which is what was contained in that 2023 constitutional amendment, that ballot initiative, and trying to restore parents and judges in some ways to the process here of deciding abortions. Judge, you have run into, and I'm just looking at some of the things that you had mentioned to me when I was contacting you to come on the program today. They're coming for you. They're coming for you for apparently for your free speech rights and your right to wear a shirt that says freedom on it. It looks like you've become a target for another reason. What's happening?
Yeah, and it's I don't think it's coincidental that the timing is back when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Back when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, I as a judge organized, and as a member of this community, a longtime member of the community here in Trumbull County, Ohio, Mahoning Valley. I used to be a county commissioner, a city councilman. I've been involved for many years, right? School boards. And when Charlie Kirk got assassinated, it hit me hard. I mean, I talked about the things that Charlie Kirk talked about as a domestic relations judge about what it means to have a great marriage, okay, and the elements of a great marriage. I quoted Charlie Kirk from the bench. So he dies. I organize a vigil. I'm in my robe. I have a TikTok. It's called Judging David, and I've had 800,000 views or so. But in my robe, I'm saying, hey, please come to this event on that Sunday. We're gonna sing. We're gonna say prayers. We're gonna sing country music with the Chris Higbee Band, and we're gonna watch the services on the jumbotron that Chris Higbee Band brought. Okay, great band, and I do it. I get a grievance filed against me by this guy. This guy says, well, Engler is so biased and such a right-wing kook that he shouldn't be a judge and he should be reprimanded. I don't think anything of it, Bob. Nothing of it. I think this is a ridiculous grievance against me being a judge. They're saying because I wore my robe and I invited people to a community event. Well, I get a letter last week from the Ohio Disciplinary Council saying, like, what was your T-shirt that said that you were wearing? Who paid for those T-shirts? Why were the Republican women involved? Who paid for the water? All of those things. Who held the camera when you were filming yourself talking about this event? Like, I can't, as a judge, invite people to a community event to mourn the loss and celebrate the life of Charlie Kirk as if that was something wrong. I tell you, Bob, I absolutely believe that I'm being targeted because I'm a strong vocal Christian, talking about my belief and my faith. And anyone was invited. And so much so that if you see the pictures of me that day, I have a freedom shirt on, the same freedom shirts you wear. I had to wear a bulletproof vest because the cops wanted me to, because some nut job who didn't like one of my previous decisions as a judge threatened me. And there was nothing we could do to keep him from the public event. So they advised me, and one of the police officers gave me a vest, and I wore it, for that day. I didn't say anything about it at the time because I thought the event, which turned out fantastic, we had over 300 people there. It was a beautiful day, and we watched the services. But now I have to answer questions to this self-appointed group down in Columbus, the Ohio Disciplinary Council, as if I've done something wrong.
Two follow-ups to that, Judge. What does that feel like to be told put on the bulletproof vest? The fact that you had to, and they were right to tell you, by the way, they were, because who would have imagined somebody would have shot a guy sitting in a booth with a microphone having discussions with people, but being really, really good at it and embarrassing them when they don't know how to answer the questions that he poses, or they don't like the answers that he gives to their questions. But what does that say? What does that say to you? And I'm gonna be blatantly partisan here, Judge. I don't see this happening in the other direction. The bullets are flying one direction all of the time. The metaphorical and figurative bullets and the literal physical bullets are always fired from the very angry left at the very, what we're trying to be peaceable, right? People on the right.
Yeah, it's, what, Bob, I'm grateful for the police officers, and I'm happy that I have their support in this race too, the FOPs throughout the 11th district. Because when you're told to do that, and you see the threat, that was on social media, that this guy that wanted to come after me, you sort of, I don't know, you sort of want to shrug it off, but then people say, you can't shrug this stuff off. You can't dismiss it because it's real. And, they say, you must do this. And the people it affects the most are like my wife, right? My wife and my kids, they like, Dad, why are you doing this? Husband, why are you doing this? Why put yourself out there, right? Because the whole idea is to try to keep me from saying and doing what I believe is important. Literally, what I took an oath to do as a judge is to protect kids in this county. And sort of it's hurtful. It's very hurtful that when you realize what they're doing, and then I always lean back on scripture, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid, for the Lord is with you. I mean, and that's where I come from, and I'm looking at my bracelet on my wrist, where I have that phrase on there just to help remind me, because I need reminded too, because Bob, it's easy to just retreat back and say, well, I won't do anything. And my life goes on. If I don't file a lawsuit, if I don't have a vigil for Charlie Kirk, my life could be better even, maybe, if I don't act upon my convictions. But that's not how I was made, though.
No, and good for you, and good for, all of your constituents and the people, that you serve on the bench for that. And I completely support that. The other thing I wanted to follow up, but I've got now two other follow-ups, because I want to talk about what can happen to you with this disciplinary council. Hopefully nothing, but I want to talk about what you face. But you brought up Charlie, and of course the freedom shirt was why this whole thing happened. And I'm going to take you off screen for a second here and expand my own, just so you can see my wall behind me here in my studio. That picture over my right shoulder over here, that's not a picture, it's a painting, as is the Trump picture. I'll move out of the way so you can see that too. But that painting of Charlie Kirk is one that I would love to see hanging in your chambers, because it is a painting of Charlie. It's a bit of a mural done by a local artist here in Northeast Ohio by the name of Ray Simon. And you can see his work on raysimon.art. That painting, by the way, the original, this is, of course, a print, but that original painting is hanging in Mar-a-Lago with President Trump right now.
Wow.
Yeah, and the portrait of Trump that he painted, that Ray Simon painted, is actually hanging in the White House. The original of both of those. I was gifted both of those by RaySimon.art. So if I can, I'm going to have one of those sent to you and everybody else. By the way, you should seriously consider going to RaySimon.art. And if you use my last name, by the way, France, Frantz, you'll get a big discount on it too. But Judge, I bring it up because, and we can put you back on screen now if you would, Dylan, handle that. I bring that up because you obviously were very influenced by Charlie Kirk. You know, men of our age typically don't look up to as role models people 20, 30 years to our junior.
Right.
But I did with that inspired, and I think God touched young man who moved so many people in his young 31 years of life before he was taken. He had such a monumental impact, I think, on so many. I looked up to that young man, and it's why this is on my wall behind me, and it's why I continue to wear this shirt as you do. If you wanted to speak to that.
No, absolutely. By the way, Ray Simon's a dear friend of mine for more than 30 years.
I had no idea you knew who he was.
Oh yeah, I was with him on Friday, matter of fact.
All right.
But you know, I would love to have that in my chambers. And I've said on my TikTok, you know, I had what Erica Kirk said at her funeral. And again, remember, I do divorces, right? I do family law as a judge. And what she said about what it means to be a good husband, and what Charlie Kirk said, what it meant to be a good husband, and how you live out your life in that way. It was so influential to me to listen to what Charlie Kirk had to say, and to try to bring my game up, right? Bring my game up so that I'm worthy of that influence that Charlie Kirk has brought to my life. And I'm happy that he did bring that influence to my life. And for people like you who have the courage to get out there and talk about these issues very openly, it's fantastic. I'm glad Charlie Kirk exists. I'm glad you exist. Another one that I love is Allie Beth Stuckey. I don't know if you ever listen to Allie Beth. Oh my goodness.
Allie Beth actually came to Northeast Ohio back in oh, for goodness sakes, was it January? I'm trying to remember. I think it was January, at an event that Charlie was scheduled to be the keynote speaker for.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, you know, so funny that you just mentioned her, and maybe you were at that event. I don't recall.
I was not. No,
Okay.
you know, and like Allie Beth Stuckey,
she's an incredible Christian and patriot, and a great voice carrying on the spirit of Charlie Kirk. No doubt about it. Yeah.
She might be like 42 or something, 40. I don't know how old she is, but she's an influence to me. I'll say it, she's an absolute influence to me. And I know who you're an influence to is a guy that I saw last night at the Portage County Tea Party event. And I gotta tell you, I've been around for a while, you know, doing government work. Was Marcel Sturbich.
Oh
Wow.
yeah.
Was he fantastic? I mean, he is just, and by the way, in Ohio now, as of April 2nd, judges are allowed to say nice things about people running for office, okay? Judges are allowed to actually do statements of support, like,
Endorsements?
I know, yeah, I could say Marcel Sturbich is one hell of a good candidate. He absolutely knows what he's talking about when it comes to election law and keeping our election safe. And he's also a way that people could say, like, hey, I'm not so happy with the establishment politics of Columbus right now. And electing Marcel Sturbich is a way to like blow that up and say, yeah, there's a different path forward, instead of like waiting your turn and circling, you know, doing musical chairs down in Columbus until you get, you know, what the establishment tells you you should get. So boy, I was very much impressed with Marcel Sturbich. I'm also happy to say that, you know, Judge Matt Lynch, because of this new ruling from the Supreme Court, the guy's job I'm trying to take here in the 11th District Court of Appeals, says he supports me, and he supports my election as the 11th District Court of Appeals. And he's a heck of an individual. I don't know if you know Matt at all.
I've known Matt for quite some time, and a big supporter of his, and a friend of his, and I love the fact that he supports you. And that was one of the other two follow-ups that I had. One, I want to find out what the disciplinary council can do and what this means when you have to go before them. Second, I wanted you to talk about your race and to talk about the Court of Appeals. So you did that just a little bit here. I'm glad to know that you have Matt Lynch's support. What else can you tell us about that, and how can we or anybody watching right now support you in that race?
Well, the race is the 11th district, which is Trumbull County, where I'm a common pleas court judge, then Ashtabula County to my north, Lake County, then moving across to the west, and then down from Lake County is Geauga County, where Matt Lynch is from, and then below Geauga County is Portage County. So those 5 counties, which is approximately 1 million people or so, comprise the 11th District Court of Appeals. The election is May 5th of this year. There's no Democrats, so if I'm in, I win this race. They can go to my Facebook page and most importantly, go out and vote. I just need people to vote. Tell their friends, support me any way you would like. You can call 330-980-4487 and leave a message, say you want a yard sign.
Great.
I've always sort of been a one-man band, because I'm busy otherwise, but we have an aggressive campaign, and I have taken advantage of the fact that there's a recent Supreme Court decision that says just because you put on a black robe does not mean you lose your First Amendment rights. And this is an important piece for your show in particular, is that it used to be in Ohio, used to be like 3 years ago, that Supreme Court justices, Court of Appeals justices, I don't think the people who are in control, whether it was the party bosses or big money or insurance companies, they didn't want you to know who you were voting for. And you voted people on the name of, it was an Irish name or a German name or Italian name, reasons that had made no connection to who the person actually was. But now that's changed in Ohio, where you get to know who you're voting for and what they stand for. That's why I'm talking about this abortion issue, where I stand on other issues of being a very strong Christian conservative. That's who I am.
Well, Judge, I love that, and I'm so glad to hear that, and I hope people will indeed call and support you and get yard signs and so forth, because we obviously see eye to eye on so much. I want to talk about judicial activism. And the reason why is because, again, some might say that Engler is being an activist by wearing that shirt. It's why you have to go down and talk to that ridiculous commission, or whatever they're calling the group you have to see. I often talk about how I cannot stand left-wing activists wearing robes, and they're judges, but their ideology and their activism seems to supersede their responsibilities. You're very vocal as an activist because of the stuff that we're talking about right now, and as you said, you've got an aggressive style and so forth. What can you say about the difference between a judge who actually has different opinions and activist activities off of the bench compared to somebody who brings that stuff to the bench with them? Because that's what people will say about you. It's what I say about people like Ketanji Brown Jackson. It's what I've said about a lot of these, Boasberg and these left-wing judges that are not interpreting the Constitution or federal law, or in your case, Ohio law. They're bringing their ideology with them and using that to taint their decisions. That's what makes them activists in robes as opposed to judges. Can you talk about that separation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea in why, first and foremost, being a conservative, the whole definition of me being a conservative, you get to know what my values are, what I bring to my decision-making process. But underlying all of that is I raise my hand, I take an oath, and I'm going to follow the Constitution and the laws of Ohio. I'm never going to stray from the Constitution or the laws in terms of making some type of decision because I think it's the appropriate decision. I'm going to try to twist or turn the laws to go in a different direction. That's an activist judge, and I don't think we need any activist judges. But we do need judges who understand, I happen to have a sense that governments get too involved in our lives. And I don't generally like the fact of government overreach in our lives, in particular when you have bureaucrats who are unelected making rules and administrative decisions that affect us. I had a famous case down in Mahoney County regarding a bike path where the government wanted to take by eminent domain a property of an older lady because they wanted to put a bike path in. She didn't want to sell it to them. And they said, well, this bike path would be really nice for people to ride their bikes on. She goes, I don't want to sell it to them. Go someplace else. And then she came to me and she said, you know what, Attorney Engler, why is the government using my tax dollars to fight me when I don't want to sell them my farmland? I like my farmland without a bike path going through the middle of it. And she was right. It took us 6 years to win that case. 6 years to win that case. But judicial activism would be a judge trying to like predetermine an outcome, like, oh, I think bike paths are nice for people who want to go biking, versus understanding at a core issue, if people own property, they shouldn't be fear the government telling them what to do with their property. That's the difference between a conservative and a liberal is always going to make decisions. A liberal judge is going to make a decision to twist the law and to be outcome driven. I'm more process driven. My whole job as a judge on the bench, regardless, the disciplinary council saying like, oh, you support this conservative cause. It has no effect on me as a judge. I call balls and strikes, Bob. I mean, I have to be a fair arbiter of everyone comes before me. And the people that come in front of me as a judge, they all say the same thing. He's fair. He's absolutely fair. Their politics, their religious beliefs never interfere with the job that I do as a judge. And it'll be that way on the Court of Appeals as well. But always be aware, whoever that judge you're voting for is, understand what their moral background is, understand where they come from as a human being, but also understand, is this just like a career move for them? Are they in it just because it's a better job or more money? You have to see, does that person actually have a passion to applying the issues of justice in a way that makes our lives better? And that's what I hope to accomplish in this job.
That is a great, great response, and I appreciate the philosophy and the explanation of that philosophy too. Unfortunately, we see far too many judges who don't do that. They see their agenda first and the Constitution second. They'll twist that Constitution or twist Ohio law or federal law or whatever to meet their ideological position rather than to interpret it as it.
And here's a good example. I just read a decision from the 11th District Court of Appeals. It was a unanimous decision. In that decision, there was a municipal court judge who, the prosecutor in a case, it was a domestic violence case, decided that they wanted to dismiss the charges. The prosecutor says, we want to dismiss the charges because there's not enough evidence to go forward, okay? That was the prosecutor's decision. The judge in that municipal court said, well, I don't think I'm going to grant that motion to dismiss prosecution because I think if you take this piece of evidence, that piece of evidence, some jury may make a decision that supports a conviction of the individual. That went to the 11th District Court of Appeals, and those are the type of cases I would hear. It was interesting because the Court of Appeals said, judge, be a judge, let the prosecutor be a prosecutor. If a prosecutor determines that they don't have enough evidence to go forward, that's their job. When you as a judge start making a determination, I think you do have enough evidence, then what you're doing is you're crossing that separation of powers. There's the executive branch, which is the prosecution, and the judicial branch. They have to remain separate. So that's a really clear example of if you're applying your conservative principles, you're always going to come up with that decision. It's like, you're a prosecutor, you're a judge. You have separate jobs. Judge, don't because you want to appear tough on crime, dismiss the prosecutor's motion to dismiss. You got to let a prosecutor be a prosecutor. Just got to let a defense attorney be a defense attorney. Everyone has a fair shot when you go into court. You can't be biased to say, like, I'm going to show the public I'm so tough on crime, I'm never going to even let the prosecution dismiss a case. And so I know lawyers were upset, including the prosecutors in this one judge's courtroom, because she was like, not allowing the prosecution to ever amend a charge or plea bargain or do any of those type of things. But you got to be a judge. The prosecution's separate.
That's well said, Judge, and I'm so glad to hear that. And I wanted to follow up with you on one other thing, because the more you talk, the more I come up with new questions, because I appreciate these very much. But you mentioned the eminent domain case where the woman didn't want to sell her home to the state or the county or whomever it was who was going to build that bike path. It just brings up property rights. I don't know if you're allowed to opine upon this or if you choose to right now, but since we did talk about, obviously the lawsuit you filed, which was over the constitutional amendment on abortion and that language, do you have an opinion, or do you want to give an opinion on the constitutional amendment ballot initiative that apparently is going to be on there in November to eliminate property taxes in the state?
I'm happy to tell people my opinion. I was at the Lake County. There was a Lake County event where they're talking about the abolishing of the property taxes, and I feel like Dave Chappelle, the comedian, has a little bit where he says, like, he's talking about the brilliance of Donald Trump. Dave Chappelle is about, because like Donald Trump says, how do I know the system's rigged? Because I was in there rigging it. It was a great line that Dave Chappelle was delivering about Trump. He goes, I knew at that moment a star was born. When I was at that abolish the taxes meeting up in Lake County, I literally stood up and said, I'm an insider. For 40 years, I've been in public service in one way or another, right? And you're not going to correct the problem until you turn off the source of the blood. And at the very least, have everybody in Columbus worried that it's going to be turned off. Everyone in government worried that it's going to be turned off. I understand completely the idea that you need to turn it off and cause people to reevaluate how you're running the entire system of taxation. People should not be in their homes and paying rent to the government forever and ever. Of the 5 counties that are in my district, only one county, Lake County, voted to double the homestead exemption, to help senior citizens who are homeowners. That's sort of crazy. Now, that being said, you heard my position on property taxes. I think it's a needed exercise, and DeRolf, here's the DeRolf case. That was the famous school funding case out of the Supreme Court years ago. It went to Supreme Court 3 times. The Supreme Court said, you have to create a different system of funding schools in Ohio. But no one ever did anything about it. The Supreme Court never actually enforced their own ruling to make the legislature come up with a different way of funding schools in Ohio. When I was on the county school board for 22
decades.
years.
What year was that? Do you remember what year that was?
It was the late 90s.
Okay, yeah. So it
was the late 90s.
Been almost 30 years.
Three different times that lawsuit goes up to Supreme Court. As a judge, and I face this decision every week. If someone's not following my order, what do? I hold them in contempt. I said, you got to follow my order. There's going to be a consequence. Apparently, there was never any consequence in Ohio for not following a court order saying, like, hey, legislature, you screwed up. You screwed up. You should create a different system of funding education in Ohio. When I was on the county school board for those 22 years, and when I was a county commissioner, government's always going to find a way to spend the money that you send them. We were awash in money. There was too much money. And there's governmental systems that are out of control. There has to be a significant contraction. I understand the need. They should roll back the taxes to at least pre-2020. Don't increase taxes automatically with the increased value of your property, because how many people I talk to, and this is why as a judge, I'm always going to be out and among the people having pancake breakfasts or doing whatever. I'm not going to be in some ivory tower, because I know that what the people say is like, I don't want to sell my house and I don't want to be taxed on my house. Like I bought it for 100,000. Now it's worth 350,000. I really don't want to be taxed like it's worth 350,000, because I do not have an intention to sell it. Don't tax the person like their property tax went up, because all that did was allow government to be more inefficient. Government's wildly inefficient. completely inefficient. I could tell you that as a juvenile court judge, it's inefficient. I could tell you that as a county commissioner, it was inefficient. And I did my best to always bring efficiency wherever I was. And I talked to one of the Portage County commissioners who's a CPA, great lady, Jill. It's like, you can't manage what you don't measure. In all of my history of being involved in government, Bob, like, they were never measuring what they did, never put quantitative outcomes on their product. They'd always go back to this old liberal trope of like, well, you can't run government like a business because you have to take care of people. It was this toxic empathy. You know, you got to take care of people. You got to spend as much money as you can. That shows that you're really a sweet, kind person. Well, it's nonsense. I mean, the whole system is nonsensical. However, and I need to say this in order to keep square with the people down in Columbus, I will always follow the Constitution and apply the laws fairly.
Of course. Of course you will. Of course you will.
Of course I will.
Judge, great conversation. Last thing, circling back to the beginning of our chat, which is the lawsuit. What's the next step? Where do we go from here? What can we expect?
I hope another lawyer jumps in or a law firm jumps in and says it takes it over from me. That's number one. Number two, the Supreme Court's going to set a briefing schedule. And if anyone wants to follow that lawsuit, they could log into the Supreme Court website and sign up for updates on the David Engler ENGLER lawsuit against Frank LaRose and
I'm in.
Dave Yost. And they'll give you automatic updates. And it's fascinating because Dave Yost and Frank LaRose can say, Judge Engler, you're right. You're right. Let's send it back to the ballot commission. Let's send it back to the ballot commission for new language that clearly says parents do not have any right to be a parent, and we're taking away a juvenile court judge's ability, and let the people vote on it again. But I can tell you what, Bob, the left doesn't want that to happen, because if people who voted on that amendment didn't think they were giving their right away to be a parent and they were getting rid of my job as a juvenile court judge, I guarantee you they had no idea that's what they were doing. But the lady in the Plain Dealer who went after me, you know, calling my lawsuits, you know, frivolous or whatever she had to say.
Yeah.
Back in 23, that same lady was saying that parents shouldn't have any say in their kids' abortion decision. That's nonsense. That's you know, and I said this at an event I had a couple of weeks ago. You cannot get to communism without destroying the family. You can't get there without destroying the family. This was not an accident. This was an intentional. That's why some guy from Switzerland donated $22 million to that 23 amendment. Why? Why donate that type of money? I'm just, and I mean this, and make some people feel uncomfortable. I feel as if I'm blessed to be in this race to discover the ability that I had that lawsuit and I could file it.
I love the attitude, Judge, and I think that's a strong statement, and it's well received. Judge David Engler, thank you for a great conversation, almost an hour of really intriguing stuff. I hope we can have you back again. And I love the fact that you're a judge who is not afraid to give an opinion, knowing what I said before, that a lot of people will see somebody with opinions as being activist and not judicial. You are judicial when you're on that bench. When you're not on that bench, you are allowed to, as you say, use your First Amendment right. You're allowed to use it on the bench, but you are allowed to use your First Amendment rights to give your opinion on things, regardless of what anybody says. And I love the fact that you're willing to lean into that. So that being said, we'd love to have you back on another time.
I'd love to be on again too. Thank you so much for your help and support.
And by the way, what was that TikTok? I got to follow that account. Judging David?
Judging David 2, the number 2. Apparently there was the first judge. I think I'm the only judge in Ohio who has his own TikTok account. And
apparently there's another one, because you're number 2.
I know. I don't know who the first Judging David was, but I made liberals' heads explode when before I'm going on the bench, I tell them the prayer that I say before I go out on the bench, and I see the people in front of me. I say, God, please grant me the ability to understand, and I see the face of God in everyone in front of me today, and grant me discernment. You know, how can you say that, Judge? You're a judge. You shouldn't talk about God ever. Like, okay.
I don't want to even get into that. If you want to talk about Solomon or not. Judge, thank you. Great stuff. I'm going to follow your TikTok. I'll encourage everybody else to do that as well if you're on TikTok.
Yes.
Judging David, and then number 2. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you so much. Take care.
That was a great conversation. And before I do anything else, I need to have another conversation with you directly about your car. Have you ever had that engine light just pop on and you just ignored it? because, if you're honest, you see that light on the dashboard, you think, I don't even want to know what it's for because I don't know how much it's going to cost to fix it. Can I just put a piece of black electrical tape over it? And no, it's not that. I literally in Houston, Texas, just last weekend, we were driving with a friend of mine named Mike, who does radio in Houston, who literally was asking Charlie, the politically incorrect mechanic, can you disable all of these lights and sounds that go off in my car? He just doesn't want to know what's wrong. He wants the beeping or flashing lights and the beeping noises to go away so he can just drive. That's what people do because they can't trust a mechanic. They can't find a garage or a place that isn't going to upcharge them and just destroy their entire budget. But that's why I want to tell you about Charlie himself, Charlie Kalani at Charlie's Auto Repair in Lakewood. Charlie is one of those rare guys in the automotive repair world that knows his stuff, especially when it comes to tricky electronics issues, but who isn't going to rip you off. He's not going to upcharge you. He'll tell you what's wrong and what's not wrong, and he will not replace parts that you don't need replaced. He works on all cars and light trucks, routine maintenance, the oil changes and tire rotations and so forth, to the big stuff, engine work, transmissions. If you've got an e-check coming up, Charlie will repair that the right way, and many times you'll get your car back with a past e-check. It's just that easy. Call or text Charlie at 216-470-0170. Again, 216-470-0170. And if you're a first responder, if you're military, or if you're a concealed carry license holder, any of those, you get 10% off all of your work at Charlie's Auto Repair in Lakewood. 216-470-0170 is the number. Charlie is a patriot. He's MAGA. Give him a call. Let him make your car great again. All right. So that was a very, very illuminating conversation with Judge Engler, and we had a lot of really great content before that as well. I want to get into the chat here for just a minute or two and see what y'all have been opining about here. And thank you to everybody who was a part of the chat during the live stream, and those who are not part of the live chat because you're watching this on delay. Don't forget to hit the comment section on each episode. Let us know what you think about anything, whether it's Judge Engler, or whether it's about the Casey Putsch conversation we were having before, along with Vivek Ramaswamy. By the way, I had Casey on back in January. It's been a minute since I've had Vivek Ramaswamy on with me. He was supposed to be here this Friday. I got a text message yesterday saying that has been pushed a little bit. He had a conflict. It's going to be next week sometime. I just don't have the date yet, but we'll have Vivek on to talk about that too. But anyway, if you've got comments on these issues, use the comment section if you are watching outside of the live stream. All right, let's see what we have here. Are parents responsible? This is Calvinist 1. Are parents responsible for medical care that could become needed after an abortion? That's a very, very good question. That's a very good question. But it's why parents should absolutely be allowed to parent, as Judge Engler said, when it comes to that abortion on demand issue in the state of Ohio, including for teenagers. If that wasn't an internet video, that'd be brandishing. Okay, now we're talking about Casey Putsch now, and that. Dylan, can you put that up again real quick? The maybe just a screenshot of that video of Casey Putsch pointing that gun and saying, "Hey, Vivek, as he calls him, you want to? Yeah, there it is. You want to play cowboys and Indians? Bang!" It's not a threat directly, I don't think, because of what who said this, B Hops. If it wasn't an internet video, that'd be brandishing, maybe a threat. Technically, it probably doesn't count as an actionable threat, though. And you're right, it doesn't. But it does say a lot about the guy. It really does. It says a lot about Casey Putsch. And it's something that, quite frankly, it just reaffirms my belief that this is not a guy anybody should be looking at as governor. Yo Jimbo says, yeah, Lois Irene, Casey couldn't break a wet paper bag. He looks like a biter, with teeth. No, I'm not going to go there. B-Hop said he failed to hit the broadside of the barn, by the way. Sick of leftist policy that removed parents' rights on their minor children. Obviously, what we're talking about with David Engler. The objectivity ship sailed from the plain dealers harbor a long time ago. You are right about that. The Protect Ohio Children, an offshoot of Ohio Value Voters, OVV, has been fighting this fight for years, says Charlie. Not going to lie, I don't like the ruling that judges can endorse, says Charlie the mechanic. I think that exposes impartiality and will cause a massive disruption. Every judge will face recusal requests because they endorse someone that doesn't align with the person being tried in court. Then the appeals court will be overwhelmed. Well, Judge Engler is running for the appeals court, so that's it would be right in his wheelhouse. Let's see. I think DNR should not be on judge ballots. I don't know if I agree with that, Ross. In a perfect world where people did their homework and could find out what a judge is all about, and they were voting based on the person's history, experience, agenda, so forth, I might agree with that. But people don't. Nobody knows about the judges. And as lame as it is for us to evaluate a judge based on the D or the R after their name, it's at least something to go on, at least to start maybe the research. Maybe it's a Democrat who's not a radical nut. And if I know they're a Democrat, I'm going to research and give them a fair shot. If it's a Republican, maybe it's a rhino. If I know it's a Republican, I might give them a look-see and figure out, are they real or are they cosplaying as Republicans, but really Democrats? I mean, I don't know. It's a tough call. Fred says we need more judges like him in Cuyahoga County. Sarah says, I don't know how judges vote on their own time. Or I don't want to know how judges vote on their own time. So that was an agreement with Charlie. Let's see. We got a troll in the chat room. That's okay. We've been doing pretty well at getting rid of these people. Let's see if we can do that here. Nope, not quite yet. That's all right. The music is playing, which means we're getting ready to wrap anyway. So no big deal. I'm just trying to exit the trolls from the room unceremoniously. But that's it. That's all the time that we got for you today anyway. Everybody be well, be safe, and stay free. Please, please, please bring somebody with you tomorrow. Somebody you don't know that has not heard of our show, does not know what we do, how we do it, or why we do it. Introduce them to the show and bring them into the chat with you tomorrow. All right, it's very, very easy. Just copy the URL or just tell them to look for Strictly Speaking Unfiltered on Rumble. Tell them to look for my name. It's easy enough to find in the search bar, but bring somebody with you tomorrow. And then don't forget, leave comments in the comment section if you're not watching during the live stream. Thank you to Judge David Engler. Thanks to Dylan, who was pushing all of our buttons behind the scenes. And thanks to you, as always, for watching. New content will be dropped. I am going to give you the full hour-long interview that I did with Casey Putsch. I'm going to give it first to the Unfiltered Insiders on the locals community so that you can see it, develop your own opinion on it, and most importantly, share it with others. But I'm going to give that to the Unfiltered Insiders. Then we'll put it on the Rumble channel so you can have that full scope of what I think crazy, dangerous, and unhinged sounds like. From Casey Putsch, but I'm going to give that to you on the locals community and on Rumble later. All right, everybody. As I said, be well, be safe, and stay free. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.